There was a time when it was said that the sun never set on the British Empire. Today, the sun has set, but the new dawn of African independence has been clouded by riots, revolution, civil and tribal warfare, terrorism, and bloodshed. And the present quest by the great powers to impose their influence on the emergent states of the new Africa, by fair means and foul, has provided a role for the second oldest profession in the world, the mercenary. In recent years, British and American soldiers of fortune stood trial and suffered the brutal consequences for fighting on the losing side in Angola. Today, thousands of Cuban dogs of war have been unleashed on Africa, unchecked for the moment. Against this background, from his London studio base, British producer Ewan Lloyd has put together the first major feature film to deal with mercenaries in Africa, The Wild Geese.
Well, I've been looking for an all-star vehicle for many years. I was fortunate enough to work with Sam Goldwyn and Carl Foreman years ago, and those great producers were able to find properties for many stars in one picture. It's very difficult to find an original piece of material for 4 major stars. An associate of mine came across this story on a visit to Salisbury, Rhodesia, brought it to me. I fell in love with it and immediately took off for Salisbury to acquire the film rights. I think we have a very timely piece. What happens in our story is pretty close to fact.
Both Lloyd and Daniel Carney, who wrote the original novel, had been moved by this, the last photograph of Moise Tshombe, the deposed premier of the Congo, taken shortly before his death.
Moise Tshombe was a very extraordinary leader. Some people looked upon him for many years as a black messiah. It was such a man that President Limbani became in our picture. And we've tried awfully hard to carry the good message of Tshombe through the characterization in our picture.
Having secured the story he was looking for, Lloyd began a long search through Africa to find a suitable location.
Well, I did try to make this in Central Africa and in other black countries. I found it didn't work. The logistics involved with a picture of this enormous size are really quite horrendous. It's a military exercise, and so therefore you look for stability. And I could not find stability, in terms of filmmaking, that is, in Kenya, in Zaire, or in Swaziland. So I decided to come to northern Transvaal because the terrain is ideal, the accommodations are fine, which is a very important factor on a picture as big as this when you were housing over 300 people. And all the cooperation that I was seeking, I've managed to get from the northern Transvaal authorities.
And so last fall, a peaceful military operation got underway in the Low Veld, with 300 actors and technicians brought from every corner of the world and transported to the heart of Africa. Producer Lloyd's greatest coup was to persuade top international stars to play the mercenary officers, led by Richard Burton.
I'm afraid, like most actors, I look at the part first, and then I look at the script later. And then, if the casting is right and the director is right, then I accept it.
Richard Harris.
It was a marvelously exciting script, I thought. Interesting script, topical, because it's Africa. I thought it was very exciting and had a terrific chance of being a success.
And Roger Moore.
I've always liked Forsyth's writing, with The Desopile and Day of the Jackal and Dogs of War. And I wanted to do Dogs of War, and then I read this screenplay, and I found it a better story. No disrespect to Freddie Forsyth, but Carney's book, I think, was a better story.
The logistics of shooting a war film are probably more complex than actually waging a war. In primitive territory, roads need to be built. So do airstrips and airports, in this case from scratch. For the duration of shooting, the company became the possessor of a small airline. 4 planes to fight with. After they've been given an adhesive coating of Vaseline, they're covered in dust to camouflage them. And at least another 4 planes in daily use for transport. A movie army marches on its stomach just as any more militant outfit does. Local delicacies are conjured up al fresco. A vast assembly of vehicles, nearly 100, of all shapes, sizes, and purposes, invades the previously peaceful veldt that has remained undisturbed for centuries. The field commander is Andrew V. McLaglen, director of such classic westerns as Shenandoah and McClintock, an action director and son of an action actor, John Wayne's old sparring partner, Victor McLaglen. Andrew affectionately named the makeshift crane in memory of his father. McLaglen has worked in many countries and under varied conditions, so he wasn't put off by the toughness of the terrain.
The locations are so perfect and so fitting to the Wild Geese that, most of the time we only drive 10 or 15 minutes away from our camp. When the man wrote this story, he must have had this place in mind.
Right from the start, they knew it wasn't going to be a picnic. The British stars, together with Hardy Kruger, cast as a South African mercenary, and the rest of the actors were immediately put on an arduous training schedule, exactly like real-life mercenaries. Their training was supervised by Colonel Mike Hoare. Called in by Premier Chombe in 1964, he led his men in many spectacular campaigns against the Congo rebels.
One of my duties was to train 50 actors and make them instant soldiers. And I discovered that when I'd shown them drill movements, for instance, they're all born imitators, and they were able to do it in an astonishingly quick time.
I'm not really an army man. I've never been in the army. I've never been in the Boy Scouts. In fact, I wasn't even allowed to be an altar boy. Lucky, actually, because the first day shooting, I didn't know what to do. I'd never been in the army. They assumed that I did. So Roger Moore took me behind his caravan for a quick 10 minutes and gave me all the movements. And I looked pretty good. Say.
Well, they don't march in the IRA, you know. We had to teach Hardy Kruger as well. You know, all he could do was goose step.
When I came here, I could barely move, and now I run like a gazelle. We had a curious scene the other day where 3 chaps couldn't keep up with me. I was very delighted. I think I'm going to apply for a trial for Wales.
I don't like jumping. And I liked it even less on the film because Ewan was trying to cut on the budget, and he didn't give us parachutes. And it's a long way down from 32,000 feet. No, I don't like jumping. And I loathe guns. They always give me guns. I don't know why. I hand one in every film. Maybe it's because they just want to see how many times I blink.
Hoare is not only training the actors to behave like mercenaries physically, he also advises on what sort of man becomes a mercenary, and what sort of man a mercenary becomes.
The truth of the matter is that a mercenary fights for money. The man with an ideal sometimes is the last man that you want. The ideal type is a man who combines a spirit of adventure with a soldiering ability, so that I would end up with a man with tremendous spirit and expertise.
In the movie, the mercenaries have been recruited by a British merchant banker, played by Stuart Granger. He wants them to spring a former head of state from an army jail in Central Africa. A Hercules transporter waits to take the mercenaries to their secret destination. To enter the country silently, they have to free fall from 25,000 feet, opening their parachutes only at the last minute. The tension that ripples through the assembly of stars, actors, and stuntmen is masked by some ribald banter. The name of the mercenaries, the Wild Geese, comes not because of their descent through the skies, but from the name given to the Irish mercenaries of the 17th century. Richard Harris quotes the writer Sean O'Phelan.
The wild geese came in their thousands with the October moon. They blackened the sky and cried the coming of autumn. The flying Irish, after the siege of Limerick, straggled down the Shannon or down the Lee with Sarsfield, looking up at the skies, and took the name, the Wild Geese.
To play in the big action pictures today, you need to be tough. Although the insurance companies are loath to permit major stars to take unnecessary risks, pictures look better when it's the star rather than the stuntman who takes the knocks. On the Wild Geese location, there's a relaxed and friendly atmosphere, with the actors giving a hand to repack the parachutes of the local free-fallers. Using the same model, director Andrew McLaglen meticulously prepares for each shot. Accordingly, he shoots fast and sparingly. Colonel Mike Hoare is impressed, especially by the man leading the attack.
I'm really delighted, particularly with the officers. Colonel Faulkner, who's played by Burton. I'm absolutely intrigued to watch him giving orders. It couldn't be done better by a professional officer of 30 years' service.
The cyanide dart does its work silently and effectively. It paves the way for Burton and his men to penetrate the camp according to plan. When they meet opposition in the guardhouse, their reactions are fast and merciless. Limbani is sprung, and once again Sid Kane's models enable Andrew McLaglen to plan objectively the mayhem that is to come. But even movie battles need the occasional ceasefire. In the case of the stars of the Wild Geese, it's an opportunity to regale their wives with tales of valor, near misses, and forgotten lines, and give the world's press something to photograph and write about.
I met her in Gstaad, going up in a ski lift. I was separated from my wife. She was separated from her husband, so we took off together, and indeed, here we are. It was as near as damn it to love at first sight as you can get, I think.
It's a good idea anyway to have marital harmony, but it helps on location.
Both of us are sort of nomadic. There appears to be a lot of gypsy blood in both of us. Neither of us like sort of domestic scene too much. So it sort of suits us, really, to travel. I'll go with her while she's working. I'll become the, what's it called, a stage door Johnny.
I think it was a bit isolated for wives, you know. Ladies do like to go shopping, especially if they get their hands on your expense money. And it was sort of quite a cheap location for all of us, you know, without any shops.
The social high point of the location was the party to celebrate Roger Moore's 50th birthday. It was held in a remote Lapa, an African meeting place, not the usual surroundings in which to find James Bond having his martinis shaken, not stirred.
It was a surprise party. I was planning on doing something else, and they insisted I went. And I thought, what a rotten thing to do to me. It's my birthday. I want to do what I want. I didn't know a party had been planned.
Hangovers were worked off the next day in the resplendent surroundings of Chippies, the northern Transvaal resort where the unit is quartered. It's usually filled with holidaymakers who come to drink the mineral waters and escape from the din of the city to the peace of some of the most exotic countryside in all Africa. The stars live in villas that seem to have been built especially for movie stars, though they're the first to have inhabited them. They have unique outlooks across the veldt and gardens lush with flamboyant hibiscus, pawpaws, and bougainvillea. It's a great place to relax, play with your children, and reflect on life.
I don't think I've worked on a happier film. We do have a little point system. The point system works that if you get 20 points, like if you do a take in one, and then you get points deducted, of course, if you fluff takes.
Who's the fourth officer?
Mr. Finn has somebody in mind. Peter something.
Coates.
In South Africa.
He served there for years with the...
I try to put humor into everything I play. Otherwise, I couldn't play it. No, I mean, I have to laugh at myself before the audience does.
Editor John Glenn and his assistant John Grover have probably the most pleasing view from their cutting room they've ever had. Certainly more agreeable than the gray wastes of Pinewood Studios where they cut the Bond pictures. But here, as there, they're more interested in the screen of the moviola. Normally, Chippies would be occupied only by white families, but Ewan Lloyd has filled it with a multiracial cast and crew who live and work together as equals. Something unique in a country still deeply troubled by apartheid, but something Lloyd was determined to achieve.
I believe this is an enormous step forward because we're making the film here in South Africa. One hears in other countries all kinds of criticism of South Africa. All I can say is that in this particular context, I've had nothing but cooperation, and in particular, cooperation and encouragement to use two marvelous actors.
Lloyd was able to persuade the award-winning African actors Winston Chona and John Carney to appear in the film only because they approved of the way the script dealt with the contentious issues of mercenaries and racial integration.
I asked, what's the movie about? He said, mercenaries in Africa. And I said to Winston, you're not getting mixed up with African politics. And the man said, do me a favor, just read the script.
Winston Chona plays the captured president whom the mercenaries free from prison.
It's the things that the president says that I agree with most. My concern, both as myself and as an artist, is a concern about tomorrow.
The scene is played under a giant baobab tree, the upside-down tree as it's known, since it seems to have its roots in the air. This one's 4,500 years old and 80 feet in circumference. The previous year, Hardy Kruger wrote a novel about Africa called The Upside-Down Tree.
I didn't know it when I wrote the novel, but the strange thing happened that my love for Africa and the Africans was met in this script, and I was very pleased when I was offered the part of the South African mercenary, Peter, because he has this understanding in the story. He has to learn that Africa, the Africans and the white people in Africa can only survive when they live together.
But black and white mercenaries alike are vulnerable to the predatory Simbas who are intent on destroying them. Action arranger Bob Simmons coaches the Simbas, played by local black policemen, in the brutal death they will inflict on Kenneth Griffith. Under Kit West, a team of special effects men prepare uniforms with explosive charges in them, plus the necessary miles of cable, boxes of explosives, and intricate webs of wires and pyrotechnics that mystify all but the experts, who have to orchestrate a jungle battle by remote control.
I've had tremendous cooperation from my cast. They couldn't have been better under difficult physical circumstances sometimes. Most of us feel that we're almost fighting our own battle here ourselves. For us, a tremendous place for us to be from an emotional standpoint, because we're emotionally fired up all the time, because we read every day about things that have only happened 20 miles from here.
In a moment of unplanned drama, Richard Harris saves the life of a fellow actor.
And as he stood up, of course, the back tail of the plane was heading right for his head. I think he had been decapitated. So I dived for him and pulled him to the floor, and the tail of the plane went over us. And then I picked him up, and I think the soundtrack, I'm told, is hysterical.
Eventually, the Dakota gets away. But whether it carries the precious cargo of the president or how many of the mercenaries is for the film to reveal. Of course, it's just a piece of fiction. Or is it?